Hi class. In this week's lecture series, we'll be exploring why geography is important, spatial reasoning, and what is GIS. This is the first in a series of lectures for this week. In this first video, we'll talk about geography, why it's important, and look at a case study of how geography and GIS are related. All right, so the first question we need to ask is, why is geography important? Well, geography is much more than mere place names and locations. It is the study of spatial relationships on the Earth. In real estate, for example, we hear the mantra, location, location, location. Location, and geography in particular, is extremely important. Whether we know it or not, we use geography every day to make decisions. Some decisions that we look at or questions that we ask that are very geographically based are, where do I want my kids to go to school? What are we going to do on vacation, or where are we going to go on vacation? Or is this a good neighborhood to buy a house? And will that house go up in value? So in this next slide here, we see Tobler's law. Professor Tobler is a professor up at UC Santa Barbara, and he developed what is called the law, Tobler's law of geography, or the first law of geography. And basically it states everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related than distant things. So what this law basically states is that geography plays a key role in how things relate to each other. We see this in the real world, or in the natural world, right? In the Pacific Northwest, for example, there are several species of evergreen forest. Whereas in Southern California, there are several species of chaparral and coastal sage scrub, etc. Both regions, or both areas, have vegetation, but we can see that the vegetation is much different in Southern California than it is in the Pacific Northwest. Socially and culturally speaking, places like Minnesota have more hockey players, whereas Hawaii has more surfers, right? It doesn't mean that you won't see hockey players in Hawaii or meet a surfer in Minnesota, but you can see that the difference is there. You're more likely to run into a hockey player in Minnesota than you are in Hawaii, right? And we see this during election times, the red and blue states, right? Or areas that are more conservative or more liberal than other areas. So all of these are geographically based. Okay, so this next slide here, these are all items that have a strong geographic component, right? So we see demographic makeup of neighborhoods, healthy versus unhealthy communities, air quality versus or air quality and water quality and climate, etc., right? We can see that if we look at these in a little bit more detail and study these a little bit more, we can see that there are strong correlations between many of these items on this list. So for instance, in many parts of the world, or in our case, within the United States, there are healthier areas or healthier regions than other areas, right? So in fact, many wealthy areas tend to also be healthier areas, whereas poorer areas tend to see higher rates of obesity and medical ailments, right? So when we actually take maps of the United States and look at poverty and obesity rates and other medical ailments, boy, the correlation is so strong, it's undeniable. Grocery chains may see different items on their shelves based on surrounding demographics. Thus, it's based on surrounding customer needs and demands. And the real world example that I'm going to talk about in a moment talks about a grocery chain study. So these variations apply not only to the macro level, that is from state to state or country to country, but also to the micro level, right? So even within a small town or a small city, we can see variations from neighborhood to neighborhood in terms of demographics, wealth, etc. Okay, so here's that real world example that I just talked about. Right? This is a case study where a certain grocery chain was trying to reach out to the growing Hispanic community of Los Angeles, or in this Los Angeles area. The Hispanic population, by the way, is the fastest growing demographic group within the United States. And so there's a lot of businesses who are trying to reach Hispanics, right? So that not only to reach lots of potential customers for now, but also setting up those relationships for later on so that businesses can thrive 5, 10, or 15 years from now. But when we talk about Hispanics, what exactly does that mean, right? So this group, or this grocery chain, was spending tons of money on marketing campaigns, ads, and making efforts to quote-unquote reach out to the Hispanic community, but with very poor results. In some cases, and in some areas of LA, they were actually doing worse and looking at the possibility of closing certain store locations. And if you've ever been in this kind of business, you know that closing a store is very costly and really hurts overhead and revenue. When they came to my group, they were at their wits' end of what to do. They did what they thought were all the right things, but with very poor results. So we agreed to do a preliminary study to see if we can do something to help them out. Well, the first thing that we did was, and let's go to the next slide here, is ask them if they have ever heard of a word called acculturation. And they had not. When they were looking at Hispanics, they thought, well, all Hispanics are the same, right? Well, no. We explained to them that not all Hispanics are the same. And this, by the way, applies not just to Hispanics, but other ethnic groups as well. And according to our studies and our research, Hispanics fall into one of 5 acculturation groups or levels. And we can see that over here on the left-hand side, HA1 all the way through HA5. So let's look at these acculturation levels. First level here, the Latino Americana, right? These are Hispanics who have been in the States less than 5 years, and where Spanish is only spoken, or only Spanish is spoken, right? No English, strong cultural ties and emotional ties to the mother country or country of origin, and very little emotional ties or connections to the United States. When we move up the acculturation ladder, we can see that here we've got Hispano. And the Hispano group is where Spanish is preferred. There's some English spoken, but the predominant cultural practices are Hispanic. Next, bicultural. This is people that fall into this group are either immigrant or U.S. born. It's about 50-50. And the split between Spanish and English language is also about 50-50, right? Might speak Spanish at home, might speak English at work, or vice versa. And there are still a lot of Hispanic cultural practices. The next group up, the Nueva Latina group, this is where English is preferred over Spanish, and some Spanish is spoken. There are some cultural Hispanic practices, but there is also what is called retroacculturation, and that means that that there is a rediscovering of Hispanic cultural practices. And then finally is the Americanizado group, and this is the 3rd generation U.S. citizens. Few Hispanic cultural practices, if any, and very little, if any, Spanish is spoken. So this is what you would call, for lack of a better term, Americanized, or someone who doesn't have any or very little emotional ties or connections to grandparents' country of origin, for instance. Okay, so when we did show them this, they were like, okay, so where do these groups fall in relation to their stores? And so what we wanted to show them is that there might be a lot of Hispanics where your stores are located, but what kind of Hispanics? What acculturation level are we talking about? So in this first map, shows the Latino Americana segment. The blue areas are the areas of highest concentration, whereas the red areas are the areas with the lowest number of this segment. right? And we can see the dots around showing the store locations themselves. The segment is located mostly in South Central LA area and are not really represented in the well-to-do or the more higher-end areas of LA. So here's South Central LA right here, and here are the more well-to-do areas of LA. So we can see that these store locations have very little potential to reach this demographic segment. The second map here is the Hispano segment. We can see that this group has broken out of the South Central LA area, but still not in what we call the well-to-do areas, right? So this is still lower middle class areas of the LA region. And notice that the store locations are not really capturing this segment as well. There's little potential here. The third map, we have the bicultural segment. This group is moving farther and farther away from South Central LA and are seen in the lower middle class and a few middle class areas. So this grocery store is starting to capture this segment, or starting to see some potential of capturing this segment. The fourth map is the Nueva Latina group. Right? So, and this is probably the best group for these store locations. Notice that this group are located in the upper middle class to upper class of areas of LA and correspond really nicely with these store locations. And then finally is the Americanizado group. And this group is in the higher end areas of LA. We can see that this store chain has the potential of capturing this group as well, and would probably rank as this chain's number 2 segment to target. So needless to say, this grocery store was impressed with our initial analysis, and we ended up winning the sale for a full-blown GIS study. All right, so that's it for right now. Stay tuned for the second video of this week's series where we cover spatial reasoning. Thank you very much and have a great day.